सपने ढूंढने नींद भरी आंखों से तेरी।
All right, welcome everybody. Please be comfortable. Take a minute to settle down. You can be seated, you can be lying down, whatever's comfortable. Just start with a little silence. Noticing the background of silence. Even if your mind is busy, there is an ever-present background of silence, completely unaffected by whatever is happening on the surface. In today's practice, I will be reading from the teachings of Sri Aatmananda, Notes on Spiritual Discourses of Sri Aatmananda. He is the teacher of Rupert Spira. Some of you have, actually he's the teacher of Francis Lucille. I think that's how you pronounce his name. And Francis Lucille was the teacher of Rupert Spira. And a very wonderfully clear transmission of non-duality. And I'll just be reading some selected lines from his teachings. To an ignorant person, the objective world is an obstacle to spiritual progress. Because objects always draw such a person away from their own real center. But one who has encountered the truth as revealed by their teacher, their guru, the same world serves as a help on their spiritual journey, since every one of these objects points to their real center. Consciousness alone is alive everything objective is dead and inert. In the Upanishad, it says, Sakalang Drishyam Jadam. Sakalang means all, Drishyam means what is experienced, encountered, seen. Jadam, dead. Consciousness alone is alive. What is the meaning of grace? He says, really, it is a meaningless word, but the Shastras endorse it in a certain way. I'm going to try to pronounce this as Sanskrit. Durlabang Trayang Evai Tad Devanugraha Hetukang Manushyatvam Mumuksutvam Mahapurusa Samshraya. So it says, rare possibilities. To be born as a human being is a rare possibility. Having been born as a human being, to have a keen desire for liberation, rare possibility. To come in contact with a sage who points you in the correct direction, rare possibility. These three rare possibilities are attained by divine grace alone. Qualities cannot subsist independent of a permanent background. In the subjective realm, there is such a changeless, deathless, permanent principle as the background, and that is the I principle. In the presence of this permanent, subjective background that prompts you, it is the presence of this permanent subjective background that prompts you to search for a corresponding permanent background behind the objects as well. Examining the objective world from the standpoint of this I principle, you come to such a permanent background behind objects as well. These two backgrounds meet and are one in reality. This is so profound. I wonder if how many of you got this. There's a changeless, deathless, permanent principle in the background. This is the I principle. The presence of this permanent subjective background that prompts you to search for a corresponding permanent background behind the objects as well. Examining the objective world from the standpoint of this I principle, you come to such a permanent background behind objects as well. And these two backgrounds meet and are one in reality. You've just encircled, these are my words now, you've just encircled the illusion. You got in touch with the permanent background on this side and the permanent background on that side. And you've encircled the illusion, and therefore you're free. How does one realize? One realizes neither as a direct result of renunciation, nor as a direct result of action, but only through the deepest conviction that one is not a doer, even when engaged in incessant activity, and one is not a renouncer or non-doer, even when one takes the role of a sannyasin or enters deep sleep. Realization depends upon the perspective alone and not upon any external manifestation. So see if you can touch this. For a micro moment, can you touch the space of not being a doer, even in the middle of activity, and not even being the non-doer? In your renunciation or in your sleep. Earnestness and sincerity to know the ultimate truth is the only qualification required to receive initiation into the truth. These bring it all. These bring in all that is needed. Earnestness and sincerity to know the ultimate truth. You have trained in a wrong groove of thinking from your very birth. You have only to give up this wrong groove and take on the right groove of thinking. All your visions are just a projection of your own mind. But you do not know or feel this to be so during the vision itself. It's only when you rise to the higher plane that you realize the previous visions to also be only projections of your mind. Conditioned existence is life. Limited consciousness is thought. Peace expressing itself is feeling. Happiness is beyond mental pleasure. It means tracing the source of happiness you have enjoyed back to your real nature. The incessant pursuits of objects of pleasure by man and the real source of all that pleasure are clearly illustrated by the simple story of a dog. The dog got a dry bone and began to munch it hard, looking for blood. This munching bruised the dog's gum, and a few drops of blood came out. The dog immediately tasted this blood and thought it came from the bone. So the dog began to munch the bone harder, and more blood came out of its own mouth. Thus again, the dog drank until at last it was exhausted and left the bone. This is the condition of humans who hunt after objects of pleasure, encouraged by the glimpses of pleasure they occasionally seem to enjoy immediately on contact with them. Like the dog, humans also take the object to be the source of the pleasure enjoyed and pursue it with still greater avidity. But the moment we come to understand that it was our own real nature of happiness that we were enjoying all along in the name of pleasure, the pursuit of objects stops altogether, and we become centered in the true self, eternally happy. Though desire is a prelude to worldly pleasure, yet, notice carefully, you enjoy pleasure only when that desire ceases. That is, when you reach the stage of desirelessness. Your desire for the object causes your body and mind to be incessantly active in order to get that object. And this activity continues until you achieve your object. But once the desired object is achieved, the activity, having no other object, naturally ceases. The body and senses relax. The mind gets quiet. In this stage, you are absolutely desireless. It is then that your real nature of happiness shines by itself. Soon after, when your mind begins to function again, you connect the happiness experienced with the preceding object. Happiness dawned only when desire changed into desirelessness. The goal of all desire is happiness. Since happiness is achieved only by desirelessness, the true goal of all desires is desirelessness. After we awaken from deep sleep, we make two spontaneous assertions. One, I was at peace. Two, I did not know anything. These two statements refer to the very same experience, one positively and one negatively. And therefore, they cannot be different. The second is, in fact, only a paraphrase of the first. The second statement means only that I did not know anything other than the positive experience of deep peace in deep sleep. So there was no body present there at all. This proves not the existence of unconsciousness, but its non-existence in deep sleep. Understanding deep sleep correctly, you find that the I principle is there in its real nature. The I principle shines incessantly. So when you wake up from deep sleep, so when you say you wake up from deep sleep, it is wrong. For your deep sleep in your real nature continues without a break. That is to say, you never come out of this I principle. All the worlds created by you in the waking and the dream states are withdrawn into you in the deep sleep state. The world as such does not exist in deep sleep. but only as the pure I principle. When you love an object, the object is outside and the love is inside. They can never meet as they are. The contact is established inside, where the gross object is represented by its subtle form or its thought. So the real contact is only between your own thought and your own feeling. Hence, it comes to mean that you have only ever loved yourself. This is worth repeating. When you love an object, the object is outside and the love is inside. When you love an object, the object is outside and the love is inside you. They can never meet as they are. The contact is established inside when the gross object is represented by its subtle form or thought. So the real contact is only between your own thought and your own feeling. Hence, it comes to mean that you only love yourself always. Knowing that you only desire yourself and you only love yourself, this much is enough for you to be free. He gives 4 different definitions of mind. One from the Yoga Vishishta. Mind is that which oscillates between consciousness and inert matter. Sakalang Drishyam Jadam, right? The mind is that which oscillates between consciousness and inert matter. Yoga Vishishta. Then Upanishads. The mind is only the name of a function. Vritti Nama. The mind is only the name of a function. This tendency to name things. Then Swami Vivekananda says, the mind is not a substance in itself, but only that standpoint viewed from which the absolute appears diversified as the manifested world. So the mind is not any entity, in other words, it's just a particular standpoint from which the absolute appears to be diversified as the manifested world. It's just a point of view. Guru Nathan says, mind is consciousness appearing limited. What is the relationship between deep sleep and the waking state? It is often said that a person awakens from deep sleep on hearing a sound. meaning thereby that hearing the sound was the cause of waking up. No one makes use of senses or mind in deep sleep because they are not there. So the sound could not have been heard in deep sleep. And when it was heard, the person must certainly have been in the waking state. An experience definitely belonging to the waking state can never be said to be the cause of the waking state. So the statement is wrong. It is not the sound that wakes a person up. You wake up from the deep sleep state. You cannot find a cause for it. Why can you not assume that you likewise came to the waking state and heard a sound? Why do you want a cause for the waking up? You see how subtle this gets? It's fascinating. You hear truth from the lips of your guru. You follow the words, their meaning and their goal, which is the ultimate. You rise from level to level, from body to mind, from mind to consciousness. On thus hearing the truth from one's guru, the understanding of the truth is immediate, instantaneous, complete. Soon after, you come back to the body idea. The truth that is heard from the lips of the guru takes the disciple from level to the ultimate reality. In order to get established there, the disciple has to remove innumerable obstacles. The knowledge of the truth that has been acquired from the guru helps him to overcome all these obstacles. When this is done, realization is complete. So beautifully described. You say you love your wife, but suppose she passes away and you are left alone near her dead body late at night. It creates in you not the feeling of love as before, but a creepy sensation from head to foot. This shows that before her death, you were not extending your love to that inert body part still lying before you, but only to the life principle in it, which has already left the body. The life principle, this life principle can easily be proved to be changeless consciousness, which is neither born nor dies. Your real nature is changeless consciousness. Therefore, it is clear that you love only yourself, even in the form of other objects or other people. Hence, the Upanishad says, a man does not love the wife for her sake, but only for the self in her. And the wife does not love the husband for his sake, but only for the self in him. The self is objectless love or peace. Love for self, and this is self with a small s. Love for self is degraded compared to pure love for the self, capital S, true self. So to reach your real center, the I principle, you have to retrace the whole course from objects to people to your true self in the reverse order. If in your love of objects, you are able to emphasize love over the object, you will easily get to the love aspect or the peace aspect of reality. Just as in your consciousness of objects, when you emphasize consciousness, you get to the consciousness aspect of reality. You love the true self more than anything else. How to console someone in misery. Examine what misery is and rise above it. This is advice from the highest level. But from a lower level, one can say that real life is the result of the harmonious functioning of the head and the heart. Excessive misery or joy is caused by the intense working of the heart divorced from the head. And the callousness is a result of the head working divorced from the heart. In both these cases, one should correct the excess of the other and bring it to normality. In the case of a person groaning under misery, the faculty of reason should be aroused. You should be made to feel that this misery is beyond the control of human effort. And no amount of grief will mend matters. Indeed, it will only make him more miserable. So I think he's pointing to balancing the heart and the mind. You're miserable when either your heart is emphasizing or your mind is emphasizing itself. In the Ramayana epic, the monkey king, Bali, possessed a boon by whose power he took over to himself half the strength of every adversary he met. So when Atma Tattva, the truth of self, is once recognized and accepted, it begins to gain additional strength from every experience, worldly and unworldly. It is viewed and analyzed in the light of the truth. It comes into every thought and takes possession of it unnoticed. How beautiful is this? Bali had the power to take on half the strength of every adversary he met. What a powerful way of thinking. Atma Tattva is not something you have to acquire or import. It's already there. It's your I principle. Once you recognize this I principle and turn to it earnestly, it will begin to enlighten you. It will not stop enlightening you until you are led to the very core of your being and you are established there. Standard of morality. Current standards of morality are purely relative and differ vastly with time and place and several other factors. But since human beings are essentially the same all the world over, a common and absolute standard of morality is necessary. But this, however, is rarely thought of. Such an absolute standard becomes necessary only for those who are on the path to the absolute reality. There are very few such people, and hence the absence of any satisfactory definition of a single standard of morality in the Shastras. The following can be an absolute standard of morality. 1. Vice. What is vice? That particular act or thought or feeling that tends to inflate your sense of separation or ego. Virtue, that act or thought or feeling that tends to attenuate the ego. In other words, all acts and thoughts and feelings directed towards the I principle or to its own nature, to our own nature, are virtuous. Virtue and vice have a place only in the relative sphere. In the relative sphere, that which tends towards selflessness is a virtue, and that which tends towards selfishness is a vice. Love itself can be both selfish and selfless according to its goal or motive. Objectless love is virtue. When you understand from your guru who you are and what you are, you transcend both vice and virtue. A practitioner once attempted a particular yogic exercise which he was not authorized to do by his guru, and he got into trouble. His guru had already passed away, and so he came to Sri Aatmananda for help. In the course of explaining the position to him, the above question was incidentally taken up and discussed as an example. The question is to put the mind in a blank state. So he says, every sadhak or practitioner is not permitted indiscriminately to do this exercise. Parallel to the thought force of the individual, they are corresponding cosmic forces of the world, and both are governed by phenomenal laws. So do not try to create a blank state in your mind. Train your mind in a sufficiently strong course of sattvic thoughts, capable of warding off other undesirable thoughts that might come from the cosmic world. Because if your mind is suddenly divorced from all its own thoughts, there's a natural tendency for the thoughts in the cosmic world to rush in and overcome your mind. The strong walls of your adherence to sattvic thoughts, thoughts relating to the ultimate truth, can alone protect you against this. Very subtle points here. So what I'm getting from this is, don't try to push yourself to have to be, this is a big challenge people have. They think they have to be thoughtless in meditation. Don't try to be thoughtless. Just let it happen gradually. Let it happen by itself. Trying to force yourself to be thoughtless. You read somewhere that you should be blank and thoughtless. And Sri Aatmananda is not recommending that. He says, just let it happen by itself. Develop yourself gradually. So now we make some distinctions between mind and reason and will and ego. Mind is that which gathers impressions from the world, outside world. Reason discriminates and selects from these impressions, thus gathered. Will is that which precedes and directs action. It may loosely be called desire. And ego is that which claims all activities of the mind. Ego claims it. I did it. Mhm. Interesting. You must steadily cultivate the habit of perceiving the reality that is at the background of all activity. You must steadily cultivate the habit of perceiving the reality that is at the background of all activity. How do you know you're free? When the thought that you are awareness becomes as strong as your present thought that you are the body, then alone you are free. One third of the world will disappear when time is proven to be non-existent. Another one third of the world will disappear when space is proven to be non-existent. And the last one third of the world will disappear when causality is proven to be non-existent. Very mystical statements. It is not enough to remain as a witness. Go a step beyond the witness to the ultimate reality itself, proving that there's nothing else to be witnessed. You are the absolute. How do I know if I have strayed away from my real nature? And Sri Atmananda says, you have not strayed away. And the questioner says, then who wants to know the truth? And Sri Atmananda says, the mind, the ego. Good news, you have not strayed away. Only your mind is making you feel like you've strayed away. Let's end with the story. Once in August 1950, when Sri Atmananda was staying in Bombay for a couple of days on his way back from Europe, he gave audience to a good number of spiritual enthusiasts who flocked for short interviews with him. Among them was an educated young Parsi gentleman who had been a lunatic for the past 20 years. But he had occasional sober moments for an hour or two every day. Fortunately, it was during one of these sober moments that he came for the interview. As soon as he was led in and seated, Sri Atmananda asked him, "Well, what is it that you want?" Visitor, "Well, sir, I have not come for any spiritual instruction. They say I'm a lunatic, and I also believe it, more or less." Sri Atmananda, "Sorry, I'm not a doctor. You must go to a doctor to take some advice." Visitor, "No, sir, I have tried all the doctors in vain. I heard that you are a great divine, and I'm sure you will help me out of this malady." Sri Atmananda, "No, you are mistaken. I'm not a saint. I have no powers to help you in this. Please go and seek a remedy elsewhere." Visitor, "No, sir, I'm desperate. I shall not return without getting something from you." Sri Atmananda was in a fix. The gentleman's face did not show any sign of disorder, and he felt compassion for the man. So Sri Atmananda asked him rather abruptly, "Well, what is your ailment?" The visitor said, "They say I'm a lunatic." Sri Atmananda, "Is it true?" "Yes, it is true, more or less." "How can you say so?" Visitor, "Because I know it. I cannot think about anything consistently for some time." Sri Atmananda, "Well, how do you know that?" Visitor, "Well, I know that. I can see my mind running from object to object in quick succession." Sri Atmananda, "But are you that changing mind? Or are you that knowing principle that never changes?" Visitor, "I suppose I am that knowing principle." Sri Atmananda retorted with some force, "Be that knowing principle always. Don't worry about your mind." The gentleman opened his mouth wide and sat aghast for a minute and said with luminous satisfaction, "Yes, yes, I've got it. I want nothing more from you now. Allow me, sir, to go. I shall write to you from home." Sri Atmananda said, "Yes, you may go and be at peace." He went home straight and wrote to Sri Atmananda regularly. After 3 days, 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, 3 years, the last being in August 1953, all equally assuring that he was leading a steady, happy, contented, prosperous domestic life with his dear wife and children. And all gave their hearty endorsements that he was now normal. This was indeed a miracle of the ultimate witness. Sri Atmananda had only just helped him to direct his attention to the talisman in himself, and he was saved. How beautiful. What a great story. So I think this is not the only person who's told that he's a lunatic. We are also told we are lunatics in our own way. Why aren't you more like this? Why aren't you more like that? And I think this last story applies to all of us. Turn away from being so identified with the thinking apparatus. Step back to be the witness, the knower. Stay as a knower. How strongly Sri Atmananda said, "No, enough of this. If you're the knower, then be the knower. Don't get worried about the thoughts." So beautiful, very powerful messages. I know for some of you it might have been a little intense, but it's nice to explore some deeper philosophy once in a while, deeper teaching once in a while. And each one of these lessons, even if you don't fully understand them, it's helping you shift from that groove of the mind he talked about. Shift from the old groove. Get out of that loop that you've been in. What were you reading from? I sometimes hesitate to tell you what I'm reading from because all you people do is buy books. But I'm reading from volume 1 of Notes on Spiritual Discourses of Sri Atmananda, taken by Nithya Tripta. And there are 3 such volumes. It's not an easily available book. So pray and see if you can get it. All right, this is what we have for today. Thank you all for joining. Have a lovely night. Realize that the waking state, the dream state, the deep dreamless state, outwardly these 3 states keep oscillating, but there's something in you that is a witness to all these 3 states. That's what we want you to identify with, not so caught up in activities and thoughts and words, but in that which knows, that which knows. And that is the liberation right here, right now. Douglas Harding would talk about being in a prison cell. You see, when you sit in a prison cell, you will always see at least 3 walls, isn't it? The wall to the front, the wall to the left, the wall to the right. Douglas Harding said, when you're in a prison cell, you need to recognize the wall to the front, unbreakable. The wall to the left, unbreakable. The wall to the right, unbreakable. But what about the wall on this side? He said, that's the door to freedom. That's the one you never considered. Even if you're put into solitary confinement for 30 years, there'll be a wall to the front, a wall to the left, a wall to the right. The door to freedom, which is always open, is the wall on this side, where there is no wall. It's just vacancy, vacancy. This applies not only to prisons, it applies to your life. Something happening in front, something happening to the left, something happening to the right, something happening above, something happening below. But what about this side? The door is open. But who will go in? Very few will go in. You have to decide if you're going to be one of them. All right, take rest. Be well.